really the argument they're making. They're saying that if consumers pay more, if we start charging them to use email and charging them
Not at all.
these four companies are going to take that money and expand access to the internet. That's their argument. I mean, who thinks that giving more profit to AT&T, Time Warner, and Comcast and Charter is going to result in them putting more internet access in inner cities of rural America? It's laughable. The one place which hasn't been corrupted by special interests. Congress has been corrupted. Media has had undue influence. Every other place there has been corruption and special interests. We need to keep the internet free. We need to keep the internet that is not corrupted by these four companies that care simply about their profits. Thank you for being out here.
This plan will be vacated by a court, reversed by Congress, or overturned by a future commission. But I do believe that its days are numbered. Amen to that, Mr. Chairman. Amen to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. I'm going to mark you down as a no.
Plans providers be constrained by this completely flawed regulatory intervention. I still cannot endorse guilt by imagination. It is a shame that this topic has been plagued by baseless fear-mongering. Many small businesses have been blatantly misled into thinking that they're going to be forced to pay more to continue to do business online. Others have been told that free speech and civil rights are on the line. It simply isn't true, and we know that from experience. The internet has functioned without net neutrality rules far longer than with them. Nobody can name more than a handful of examples that occurred over the course of an entire decade prior and that were readily dealt with, whether actual violations or not. The legend of a cable company trying to break the internet may make a scary bedtime story for children of telecom geeks, but it isn't reality. So, for those of you out there that are fearful of what tomorrow may bring, please take a deep breath. This decision will not break the internet. What we are doing is reverting back to the highly successful, bipartisan, governmental approach that existed before 2015. As the order makes clear, we depart from the prior Commission's approach because we determined that the decision was flawed. We believe that our statutory interpretation and course of action is the better one, and our decision is grounded in and supported by the record. The text has been publicly available for over 3 weeks, but it soon became a stepping stone to impose vastly more onerous common carrier regulations on broadband companies. Even the previous chairman initially attempted to reinstate net neutrality rules under more limited legal authority, and many companies would have accepted the compromise and lived with net neutrality rules as long as the Commission didn't impose Title II. But thanks to one infamous YouTube video posted by the prior administration, this so-called independent agency was quickly railroaded into treating ISPs like public utilities instead. As discussed at length in the order, and the dissents of Chairman Pai and myself wrote in response to the 2015 order, there were fundamental legal problems and factual errors underlying that decision.
The Obama administration, the FCC abided by a 20-year bipartisan consensus that the government should not control or heavily regulate internet access. The internet flourished under this framework. The private sector invested over $1.5 trillion in broadband networks. Consumers were protected and enjoyed the freedom to access the websites and content of their choosing. Every part of the internet economy benefited, from innovators on the edge to startups and businesses of every size. Title II did not build that. Title II did not create the open internet. And Title II is not the way to maintain it. The FCC's light regulatory touch, coupled with the robust consumer protections we restore today, supported our country's extraordinary internet success story. After a 2-year detour, one that has seen investment decline, broadband deployments put on hold, and innovative new offerings shelved, It's great to see the FCC returning to this proven regulatory approach. Now, there's no doubt that the debate over internet regulation has generated significant public attention, as it should. I, for one, have learned some colorful new turns of phrases through the course of this proceeding. And much of this is no surprise. Americans cherish the free and open internet. But when it comes to this proceeding, far too many are simply fanning the false flames of fear. What are they? Well, the DC Circuit has offered its view. When it observed that Title II allows ISPs to offer filtered internet access, it also said that none were doing so because of what it said as fear of subscriber losses. In other words, market forces, not the Title II rules, are regulating this conduct. Now, there are some that will never accept market forces as a solution, either in the broadband marketplace or otherwise. But for them, today's order has some more good news. We're not relying on market forces alone. We're not giving ISPs free rein to dictate your online experience. Our decision today includes powerful legal checks. First, Americans will enjoy robust online protections. When the FCC classified broadband as a Title II Title II service in 2015, it divested the Federal Trade Commission of 100% of its consumer protection authority over ISPs, including its ability to police ISPs that engage in unfair or deceptive practices. Repealing Title II will restore important protections for internet openness. Second, consumers will regain strong online privacy protections. Before the FCC stripped it of jurisdiction, the FTC, the nation's most experienced privacy enforcement agency, brought over 500 privacy enforcement actions, including against ISPs. By reversing Title II, consumers get those privacy protections back. Third, federal antitrust law will protect against discriminatory conduct by ISPs. As a former Obama administration FTC chairman recently said, this is a formidable hammer against anyone who would harmfully block, throttle, or prioritize traffic. Fourth, state consumer protection laws will apply and state attorney generals can bring actions against ISPs. These authorities will provide another strong set of legal protections against unfair business practices by ISPs.
Who are starting businesses. I've met with doctors in Ohio who have helped care for patients. I've met with teachers in Alaska who have educated their students. I've met with farmers in Missouri who have increased their crop yield. And I've met with many more who have succeeded, all because of the internet. And the internet has enriched my own life immeasurably. In the past few days alone, I've set up a FaceTime call with my parents and kids. I've downloaded interesting podcasts about blockchain technology. I've ordered a burrito. I've managed my playoff-bound fantasy football team. And, as many of you might have seen, I've tweeted. What is responsible for the phenomenal development of the internet? Well, it certainly wasn't heavy-handed government regulation. Quite to the contrary. At the dawn of the commercial internet, President Clinton and the Republican Congress agreed that it would be the policy of the United States to, and I quote, preserve the vibrant and competitive free market that presently exists for the internet unfettered by federal and state regulation. This bipartisan policy worked. Encouraged by light touch regulation, America's private sector invested over $1.5 trillion to build out fixed and mobile networks throughout the United States. 28K modems gave way to gigabit fiber. Innovators and entrepreneurs grew startups into global giants, and America's internet economy became the envy of the entire world. And this light touch approach was good for consumers, too. In a free market for dystopia. To the contrary, the internet is one thing, perhaps the only thing in American society that we can all agree has been a stunning success. Not only was there no problem, this solution hasn't worked. The main complaint consumers have about the internet is not and has never been that their internet service provider is blocking access to content. It's that they don't have access at all or not enough competition. These regulations have ironically taken us in the opposite direction from these consumer preferences. Under Title II, investment in high-speed networks has declined by billions of dollars. Notably, this is the first time that such investment has declined outside of a recession in the internet era. When there is less investment, that means fewer next generation's networks are built. That means less access and less competition. That means fewer jobs for Americans building those networks. And that means more Americans are stranded on the wrong side of the digital divide.
Don't take anything with you.
The fact of the matter is there is no evidence that harm exists in the sort of systematic way that justifies heavily regulating ISPs. The evidence does suggest that current regulatory structures handle bad actors perfectly well. The only future to fear is the one we never discovered, because we gave up on the approach that already has brought us so far. Now remember, folks, networks don't have to be built. Risks don't have to be taken. Capital doesn't have to be raised. The cost of Title II today may appear, at least to some, to be hidden, but the consumers and innovators of tomorrow will pay a severe price. So, what is the FCC doing today? Quite simply, we are restoring the light touch framework that has governed the internet for most of its existence. We are moving from Title II to Title I. Wonkier, it cannot be. It is difficult to match that mundane reality to the apocalyptic rhetoric that we have heard from Title II supporters. And as the debate has gone on, their claims have gotten more and more outlandish. So let's be clear. Returning to the legal framework that governed the internet from President Clinton's pronouncement in 1996 until 2015 is not going to destroy the internet. It is not going to end the internet as we know it. It is not going to kill democracy. It is not going to stifle free expression online. If stating these propositions alone doesn't demonstrate their absurdity, our internet experience before 2015 and our internet experience tomorrow, once this order passes, will prove them so. Simply put, by returning to the light touch Title I framework, we are helping consumers and promoting competition. Broadband providers will have stronger incentives to build networks, especially in unserved areas, and to upgrade networks to gigabit speeds and 5G. This means there will be more competition among broadband providers. It also means more ways that startups and tech giants alike can deliver applications and content to more users. In short, it is a freer and more open internet. And we also promote much more robust transparency among ISPs than existed 3 years ago. We require ISPs to disclose a variety of business practices, and the failure to do so subjects them to enforcement action. This transparency rule will ensure that consumers know what they're buying and startups get the information they need as they develop new products and services. Moreover, we empower the Federal Trade Commission to ensure that consumers and competition are protected. 2 years ago, the Title II order stripped the FTC of jurisdiction over broadband providers. Today, we are putting the nation's premier consumer protection cop back on the beat. The FCC will once again have the authority to take action against internet service providers that engage in anti-competitive, unfair, or deceptive acts. As FTC Chairman Maureen Olhausen recently said, and I quote, "The FTC's ability to protect consumers and promote competition in the broadband industry isn't something new and far-fetched. We have a long-established role in preserving the values that consumers care about online." Following today's vote, Americans will still be able to access the websites they want to visit. They will still be able to enjoy the services they want to enjoy. There will still be cops on the beat guarding a free and open internet. This is the way things were prior to 2015. This is the way they will be once again. Now, our decision today will also return regulatory parity to the internet economy. Now, some Silicon Valley platforms, giants, favor imposing heavy-handed regulation on other parts of the internet ecosystem. But all too often, they don't practice what they preach. Edge providers regularly block content that they don't like. When you go online, do you decide what news, search results, and products you see? Perhaps not. They regularly decide what you see. There is no transparency into how decisions that appear inconsistent with an open internet are made. How does a company decide to restrict someone's account or block their tweets because it thinks their views are inflammatory or wrong? How does a company decide to demonetize videos from political advocates without any notice? How does a company expressly block access to websites on rival devices or prevent dissidents' content from appearing on its platform? How does a company decide to block from its app store a cigar aficionado app, apparently because the company believes that the app promotes tobacco use? You don't have any insight into any of these decisions, and neither do I. Yet these are very real, actual threats to an open internet. Ironic, coming from the very entities that claim to support it. Ironic, too, that so-called net neutrality advocates, most vigorously opposed to our reforms, have little to nothing to say about these threats. These are threats that a growing number of officials, Democrat and Republican, House and Senate, are beginning to take notice of. Now look, perhaps certain companies support saddling broadband providers with heavy-handed regulations because those rules work to their economic advantage. I don't blame them for taking that position. And I'm not saying that these same rules should be slapped on them too. What I am saying is that it is not the job of the government to be in the business of picking winners and losers in the internet economy. We should have a level playing field and let consumers decide who prevails. Now, many words have been spoken during this debate, but the time has come for action. It is time for the internet once again to be driven by engineers and entrepreneurs and consumers, rather than lawyers and accountants and bureaucrats. It is time for us to act to bring faster, better, and cheaper internet access to all Americans. It is time for us to return to the bipartisan regulatory framework under which the internet flourished prior to 2015. It is time for us to restore internet freedom. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the staff who have worked so many long hours on this item,